Hello and welcome to the Video Game Book Club. This month we read Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, the triumphant, turbulent stories behind how video games are made by Jason Schreier. And the audiobook is narrated by Ray Chase, who is Prince Noctis in Final Fantasy 15, one of my favorite games. Very excited.
How was the audio?
He was great. He did an amazing job. He did a really great impression of Joel from The Last of Us.
Ooh.
I was impressed. You know, he could replace Troy Baker. Yeah. Great job. And he narrates a lot of audiobooks. What?
Should we introduce ourselves?
Oh, yes.
It's been a while.
I'm Savvy. Hi.
I'm Elise.
And we're here to tell you about this book. What does the back of the book say?
It's a national bestseller. Again,
It
Blood,
is?
Sweat, and Pixels. That's what it says on the cover. I mean, it could be totally lying to me. The
they allowed to
triumph,
do
turbulent
that?
stories behind how video games are made and includes stories behind Diablo III, Destiny, Witcher 3, Halo Wars, Uncharted 4, Shovel Knight, Star Wars 1313, Pillars of Eternity, Dragon Age Inquisition, and Stardew Valley. The creative and technical logistics that go into building today's hottest games can be more fraught with challenges and complex than the games themselves, often seeming like an endless maze or bottomless abyss. In Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, Jason Schreier takes readers on a fascinating odyssey behind the scenes of video game development, where creator may be a team of 600 overworked underdogs or a solitary geek genius. Exploring the artistic challenges, technical impossibilities, marketplace demands, and Donkey Kong-sized monkey wrenches thrown into the works by corporate, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels reveals how bringing any game to completion is more than Sisyphean. It's nothing short of miraculous. Examining some of the best-selling games and the most infamous failures, I feel like...
Oh, are you reading his description on the back?
This is the back. This is what I do. This is my portion.
But we don't read the author bio.
It's not the author bio.
Jason Schreier?
No, I'm reading.
Oh, you're still... Oh my god, it's a long bio. I thought you were just... Let me tell you about Jason Schreier.
Yes. So, examining some of the best-selling games and infamous failures, Schreier immerses readers in the hellfire of development process. Whether it's RPG studio BioWare's challenge to beat an impossible schedule to overcome countless technical nightmares to build Dragon Age Inquisition. Indie developer Eric Barone's single-handed efforts to grow Country Life RPG Stardew Valley. Yeah, I'm still not done reading the back of this.
So long.
From one man's version. And it's like half the back of the page. It's like smaller print than normal.
Oh my god.
One man's vision into a multi-million-dollar franchise, or Bungie employees spinning out from their corporate overlords at Microsoft to create Destiny. This is the longest sentence ever because it's still not done. A brand new universe that they hoped would become as iconic as Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, even as it nearly ripped their studio apart. Blood, Sweat, and Pixels is a journey through development hell, and ultimately a tribute to the dedicated diehards and unsung heroes who scale mountains of obstacles in their quest to create the best games imaginable.
So tell me about Jason Schreier.
Jason Schreier, whose picture is on the back.
Kotaku, now Bloomberg. Jason Schreier? Did he work for Bloomberg when he made this book, or is he still at Kotaku?
Kotaku.
Ah.
Leading website covering the industry and culture of video games. He also covered video game world for Wired and has contributed to a wide range of outlets, including the New York Times, Edge, Paste, Killscreen, and Onion News Network.
Onion?
That's satire.
The jokey?
Yeah.
He can be funny too, Jason.
This is his first book. So this book came out in 2017.
Oh wow. I do like the way that Jason Schreier writes. It's very like conversationally.
It is very conversationally, which makes it's he writes articles, and that's kind of what this. They're almost like mini essays, but not academic.
I watched an interview with him about his latest book, Press Reset, and he was talking about his favorite articles because he's known for like investigative journalism into crunch culture.
This book is not.
And he's like, my favorite articles are actually the really dumb ones. He did an article about a game that IGN got to review before them because they had like
Because it's IGN.
Yeah, so they got first dibs. So then they were like, we didn't get first dibs. Our article can't come out till Monday. So then they reviewed IGN's article about it. And he's like, yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Pretty much.
It's funny, though. It's out of love.
Mm-hmm.
They all know each other.
That is true. Because they all, like, end up working for each other. That's, like, that was a big common thing in the book. It's like, I worked for these other companies that make video games. Like, no one stays in the same place very long.
Video game development seems so unstable as a job.
Yes.
You could get fired at any moment. You could just decide I can't handle this anymore. This book made me not want to go into game development at all.
It seems like, especially for creative people, it seems like a work environment nightmare.
At the end of the book, I think they said something about it attracts a certain type of workaholic.
Yes, because you pretty much are guaranteed to work like 10 to 14-hour days. Just as a side note, before we get into the book, do you know who any of these people on the back cover that reviewed it are? Because I have no clue. We have like Tom Bissell. I don't know who that is. Am I supposed to know who that is?
I think I've heard of these people before. I think they're
are they other
they're other game
journalists?
Journalists, yeah.
Okay. They should.
I think I've heard of Rami. Yeah.
Put where they're from. That would have been helpful for the novices that don't know the individual.
What, you don't listen to all the industry podcasts like I do all the time? It's okay. So this list of games was really intimidating to me.
So
there's like 10 of them, and I was like, oh no.
If you're not familiar with the book or what it looks like, it is divided into 10 different chapters. Each chapter is a different game, although the chapters will talk about multiple games within them. Mm-hmm. There are 10 chapters, starting with Pillars of Eternity. The games that were listed on the front, like Uncharted 4, Stardew Valley, and it ends with Star Wars 1313.
All the chapters were 40 to 50 minutes long in the audiobook, which was nice to have a consistency. Like, I knew if I was reading a chapter, I was going in for 40 minutes.
Sometimes the chapters felt longer than they should have been, and a lot of times they were, like, you could technically read them individually. Like, you didn't have to read one after the other. You could have skipped around, but sometimes they had to do with things in previous chapters, but the way that Schreier writes, he, like, wrote what chapter that information is in.
Mm-hmm, yeah. He'd bring up chapters you're going to read later and stuff.
And I cannot tell you how many times Baldur's Gate is in this
book. Taught me two things. One, PAX is a big deal, and I need to go to PAX. Two, I need to play Baldur's Gate. Those are the two things I learned from this book.
It was in almost every single chapter.
Baldur's Gate or PAX?
Both. How influential, though, Baldur's Gate is to other game designers.
Makes sense.
What is almost in every chapter.
I need to play Baldur's Gate. And I knew PAX was a big deal, and I wanted to go to PAX. But now reading this, I'm like, definitely need to go to PAX. That's a big deal for indies.
Yeah. Bigger. I mean, E3 is also mentioned in here several times, but
I think it's definitely harder to get into E3 than PAX is.
Well,
just
I mean, especially with the way that E3 has changed
pay for
over the year. But
do you know how much money it costs to get into GDC, the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco?
I have no clue.
It's so much money.
Like, how much money?
It's like $7,000 a ticket.
Oh, dang.
And there's like tiers, and I was looking it up because, I wanted to go. But then
also,
I was
like, for those of you that are familiar with San Francisco, going anywhere in San Francisco, especially if you have to drive there, parking is like $50 a day. So not only are you paying extra to go somewhere in San Francisco, but definitely don't drive there because you be paying extra.
Yeah, you gotta find the little hidden areas.
That is true.
You go there enough, you'll learn where they are. And hopefully you don't get towed. I cross my fingers every time. So I gave this book 3 stars. When I first started, I was like, I like this. 5 stars.
I really
kept going, and I was like,
couple chapters I felt like were really good, and I liked the way that he kind of set it up. But then I got super annoyed in the middle.
What was the one game that caused you to be like, I don't care anymore?
The one, Shovel Knight really.
Shovel Knight's the 7th one. Yeah, that's far down.
But Halo Wars, I feel like was where it started to teeter for me, and then
Same.
It was like Halo Wars, and then Dragon Age Inquisition was also irritating, and then Shovel Knight I almost stopped reading, and then I finally got through, which was good because actually I really liked the chapter on Witcher and Star Wars 1313. So that there was like redemption at the end. So if you are reading this book and you start getting irritated, just skip that chapter and move to the next one. Because
I don't know about this game. I don't care.
yeah. I mean, to be honest, I have not played most of these games.
Yeah. How many of these games have you played?
I have 2.
2?
I think no, because we didn't play Inquisition, right? We played Origins.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah. No, I think you've only played
I've only
The Witcher
played 2.
3 and Uncharted 4.
Uncharted 4.
Sorry, I didn't see that. I have played.
I would have really liked to have played Star Wars 1313, but that is not a thing. So
I played all of these except for Shovel Knight and Destiny and Diablo 3. Those are the 3 I haven't played.
Are we ready to? I also gave it a 3 again because I really liked it at the beginning, and I was like super pumped into reading it, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be good because I like the way that he made the chapters. Not necessarily they're all about the games, but they're also about specific things to the gaming industry. Like one chapter is specifically on crunch, and we'll talk about that when we deep dive. Yeah. But other ones are about.
I have Pillars of Eternity's about crowdfunding. Uncharted 4's about how too much success affects a studio.
There was a lot of like overshadowing from previous games or being stuck on your previous game design. Witcher 3 I thought was interesting because it was about like international studios, which we don't really. We play a lot of games from other countries, and I don't think we fully realize it. How
Not
difficult,
just Japan.
Yeah, how difficult it is for them sometimes to break into the industry. Although multiple studios have studios in other countries. So Witcher 3 is Poland, and so that was an interesting history for them, and that honestly, like, that made me a little bit more appreciative of the things we didn't like in Witcher 3 because it was part of their culture.
Sort of. I feel like that's an excuse.
They commented on some things, and I was like, yeah, I feel that.
They're like, The Witcher was dark and edgy because us in Poland, we're just dark and edgy.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
World War II.
I guess.
And their folklores and stuff like that, but and discrimination and stuff. But we'll get in that when we get a little bit more into our deep dive. But
is it really a spoiler? I feel like. Is this really much of a spoiler? I feel like we're just going to discuss each chapter.
But I feel like when we get into each chapter, we'll talk a little bit more about the game. So especially if you haven't played some of these games, like me.
I don't think there's spoilers about the game plot, though.
But it also, I think, goes into a little bit about the chapter as well. So it's more like spoiling about the book.
He does a very good job of not spoiling the game plot. He'll tell you, like, the basis of the game, and he doesn't tell you, you know...
I think I felt like from him that he's played these games, like he definitely feels like a gamer, but at the same time, it does not get into a whole lot of specifics about the game itself. So I think if you've played the games though, like especially for the games that I've played, it definitely I feel like it helps because then you know like, you get a little bit more of the references. But I don't think I'm ever gonna play Shovel Knight, so
hater.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
I'll be a stinking hater. So yeah, you're not going to get any spoilers for like the plot of any of these games from our deep dive. We're just going to discuss the chapter. We're going to spoil the book, which is, you know, a nonfiction book about game development.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure a lot of these stories are already kind of out there for you to watch video game documentaries or something on.
Well, a lot of his material actually comes from printed articles because they're footnoted in the bottom.
Sourced.
Yeah. And definitely some of the people that he talks about, they did not want to be interviewed for this or could not be interviewed for it because the studios was like, we don't talk about Bruno. But...
Oh my God, stop. Okay, let's just get into it. I have the intro. Do you have the intro before we start into Pillars of Eternity?
There is an introduction which he kind of puts you into the seat of a video game developer who wants to make a game about a plumber. Is that kind of what you're going to go into?
No, well, I wrote a lot of quotes down because I actually really like this intro where they're like, it's a miracle any game gets made, which is how I feel all the time.
Oh, and that it's
there's no universal standard for making a video game.
No.
All games are made under abnormal circumstances, And video games are unique in comparison to like movies and stuff because they straddle the border between art and technology. Like I remember when I put this podcast up on Spotify. We're on Spotify now, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube. And they were like, what is your genre? And under art was books, and then under hobbies was video games. And I was like, wait,
But
are video games not an art and are books not a hobby? This seems a little bit strange.
yeah, that does seem strange because there's a lot of art into video games. Not only like the like drawing artwork, obviously, but like the art of storytelling. And there was I've mentioned this before, but I'm a teacher, and I got into an argument with another teacher about the fact that video games aren't literature, like storytelling. And I'm like,
I've heard
you
this
don't
argument.
even know.
You
Like,
don't understand.
there's so much to writing the story and the lore and all that stuff, and it is more complicated than most books series. And so
Some games care a lot about the story. Some games care a lot more about the gameplay than the story.
apparently, yeah, stories
well,
aren't is what drives
it fun
the game.
to play, and then story like takes a backseat all the time. I
But
feel like
for me, that's the games that I like are very story driven, which is why I like Uncharted, because it is, although mechanics are important in that game, it is very story driven.
I'm trying to think of any game I play that's not very story driven. I guess like those really old ones,
Like Street Fighter,
Mega Man and stuff.
Mega Man had a story to it, but it was like very, like, yeah, it's not story driven. He does start off with the fact that the video games are a $30 billion industry in the US alone, and that he spoke to more than 100 video game developers on and off the record, but I felt like I did not see a lot of off the record published in the book.
It's very tame. You're not gonna get anything
It's not
juicy hot deets.
Like deep dive expose. It's very much on the record.
I like this other quote from the intro that was like, making games is like shooting movies if you have to build an entirely new camera every time you started, which is the CEO of Obsidian, which I forgot his name. I'm sorry.
But that was also part of the chapters, is like, we're going to start this new game, but we're also going to use this new engine in which we've never worked on
I feel
before.
like, at first I was like, they mean engine, but not every game is made on a new engine, because sometimes you can use Unity and Unreal and stuff like that. And I also feel like that means other things other than engine, like your assets, or, gotta make new art and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Or there was a talk about first versus third, and like that changes the way that the game plays and all that stuff, or whether you should put dodge into the game, or whether that's cheating. And so that was, but that you would think all that stuff would be thought about beforehand, but reading this book you find out that no, they really do build the plane while they're in air.
They do. It sounds chaotic.
One of the quotes that I really liked, it's addressed a couple times in this book, but not probably as often as it should be, is that most of the people who spoke on this book are male, which is a depressing and unintentional reflection of an industry that has for decades now been dominated by men.
Yeah, that is sad. It's true. Lots of tech industries like that, and video games very tech heavy, so...
They do mention several women, like obviously the
Amy
Hennig for Uncharted, but she was not talked about. Of course, she had to sign an
agreement.
NDA when she
don't
left,
talk crap about us.
when she left Naughty Dog, and I think after she left EA too. But
now I know why Uncharted 4 is like that.
Where it's dark and edgy.
It's a different director.
Yeah. Well, Druckmann was part of it before. But you can definitely see the influences from Last of Us and stuff like that in Uncharted. But, yeah, it was... So he does talk to quite a few people. He talks about some people that he doesn't mention their names. So that's kind of the off-the-record thing. But I feel like anything they said is really stuff that you could see in other articles.
Yeah, we had to crunch, says anonymous developer. It was terrible. I slept at my desk and I went to McDonald's every day.
Yeah. All right, are we ready?
Yeah, let's start the best chapter. Honestly, I think this was the best.
It was a good start. So this is your spoiler alert, because we're about to deep dive into all the games and all the chapters. So the first one is Pillars of Eternity. And that is Obsidian. So there's obviously it goes into different studios. So Obsidian is the first one, and this is really about funding.
Yes.
Which we learn that for video games, budget wise, it's about $10,000 per person per month, and that's in the United States, because a large portion of that is actually like healthcare costs and things like that. But so that's where they base all of their budget around.
I didn't realize Obsidian was so... Well, now Obsidian's bought by Microsoft, so it's a little bit different now. But they used to be just like hired contractors for other people's stuff.
Yes.
They just hopped around things because they were saying if you don't have the next game lined up, then you're in trouble. Because their stuff kept getting canceled.
So they were kind of working on larger titles, but then they had a short time to do that because obviously if you have a larger title, it's kind of gifted to you and you have a timeline. And so somebody else is managing when they're going to put that production out.
They were working on this game called Stormlands for the new Kinect for the Xbox One. And they were also working on South Park, The Stick of Truth. But Stormlands eventually got canceled.
And Stick of Truth went to a different studio.
And Stick of Truth went to Ubisoft. Because THQ Nordic, I believe, went under, which is RIP. I'm so sad. Stormlands got turned into Tyranny, which you can play. And Tyranny's really good. So, like, you should play Tyranny. I can't imagine that game on Kinect, though. Kinect was funny. Remember that time? Xbox on.
I mean, you can see where they were going, and it definitely turned into what VR is starting to take over. Idea. But
So yeah, that project got canceled, and they were like, we don't have another one. They had to fire a bunch of people, and they saw that Double Fine was making money on Kickstarter for Broken Age, and I really thought they were going to say Psychonauts 2, but they said Broken Age, and I was like, oh.
That was before,
Yeah, they didn't use Kickstarter for Psychonauts. They used, like, their own funding site or something. Or like
that's what they ended up doing later. They started their own crowdfunding, which is Fig, which is what Obsidian did, yeah. But it was interesting that, so they saw this one studio on Kickstarter and they're like, well, that's a good idea. Because so what happens with video games is you basically, like movies, you have to go get, like, pitch your idea to have someone fund you. And they fund you for a certain amount of time, for a certain amount of money. But of course, you are always going to go over whatever that money is and whatever that time is, because there's always problems. But then they could cancel you at any time. So it's, I mean, it's...
What do you mean they could cancel you at any time?
You have, let's say Microsoft gives you a contract for 3 years.
Yeah.
But then they're like, no, we don't want to fund this anymore. So they just cancel you. And you're just like out of luck. And so this is very unstable
It's
industry.
Interesting because I think you can still keep the ideas though sometimes.
Yes.
Because they turn that into their own game. And I feel like if they just cancel you, then Microsoft gets to keep your idea. You know?
So this comes up later in the book because Microsoft with the Halo, Microsoft owns the IP as part of the contract because they originally owned that company. Or purchase that company, but then why am I blanking on who the studio is that made Halo? Bungie, thank you. Oh my goodness. Bungie then owns the right to the software and stuff that they used for it, but all the Halo stuff still is under Microsoft. I was going somewhere with this and I'm totally blanking on where I was going, but
yeah, I don't know where you're going.
There's so much stuff that's going on in my brain right now.
Did you guys know that Bungie made Halo?
The Halo.
I found it interesting also that they were working on Prey 2 before it was given to Arcane and then turned into Prey.
Why Prey 2?
Did you not remember the trailer for Prey 2?
Why is it?
It was like
2,
sci-fi,
not 1?
because there's already a game called Prey.
Oh.
The Prey game from Arcane was a reboot, quote unquote.
Okay, because I was confused because I'm like, we played Prey.
Yeah.
But that was supposed to be Prey 2?
That was supposed to be Prey 2, yeah.
Okay. Now I'm still confused. I don't remember what Prey 1 was.
I'll show you the Prey 1 later.
Does it similar to Prey 2?
No.
That's why I was confused. I think I remember Prey, and then I'm like, they're not the same. Why is this Prey 2?
It's an interesting story for sure, but the fact that they were working on it and then they were kicked off of that project too definitely didn't help them at all. And they were like, okay, well, we're really good at classic CRPGs. Loves Baldur's Gate. This will be brought up a lot.
The first time, not the last time.
I like that they wanted to make D&D without the bullshit, because you know what has a lot of bullshit? D&D.
They also did not have the right, so they made it before, but then when they broke kind of away, they don't have the rights to D&D.
So they had to make their own rules.
So they had to basically make D&D for themselves.
It's basically D&D, but slightly different.
Yeah, but simplified, which I appreciate, because D&D is super complicated.
Oh my God.
Too complicated for me. But what I was going back to before is Kickstarter. I found it funny that he was like, no, Kickstarter's for losers. And then there's like,
I get it though.
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, I'm sure, but to me, it makes more sense if you're getting money from the people who are actually going to play your game.
No, it makes sense for games. I never was going to do that as a film major for movies, because nobody cares about the film that I am making. I'm not begging for money.
Unless you're making, I guess, like a documentary or something.
Maybe. But why would people care about my ideas at all? Sorry, just pessimistic. But
there's a lot of film things on Kickstarter because it's hard to get money.
It's hard to get money. I helped people make trailers for films on Kickstarter, and they get like $0.
But he's like, no, we're going to go beg from these companies, but we're not going to beg from the people who are actually our customers. But then they're like, this is the only way that we can make this game. And he's like, I guess.
I kickstarted a couple games on Kickstarter.
Yeah, I funded several things on Kickstarter.
When I had money.
I'm a sucker for a fundraiser, so I'm definitely, my kids know. My fundraiser, they come out. It's like the Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts. They always get me coming out of the grocery store. But they initially,
I'm letting you go because my next thing is how much money they made.
Oh, that's what I was gonna say. So, they were originally gonna go for $1.4 million.
Yeah.
Because they calculated the $10,000 a month, and they're like, it's gonna take us this long. But again, you should always shoot higher. However, did you know? Because I actually looked this up because I'm pretty sure I was like, Kickstarter takes a percentage of your fees. They have to. They're a company.
Yeah.
Kickstarter actually takes 3 to 5% of your fees that you make. So they ended up raising $5.3 million. So that means Kickstarter made $250,000 off of that. I mean, but that's a lot of money for a Kickstarter. True, yeah. Veronica Mars.
People wanted that CRPG.
Yeah. That's one of the other thing about Kickstarters is, like, you have different, like, if we get to this level, we'll do this. And, like, you can get a t-shirt. So there's...
I love those.
You pay for... I definitely always do that.
I get those all the time. They had to learn how to use like new software too. They were switching it up. They used Maya instead of what they were using before, which is the classic. You'll hear a lot of this where they like have to make a new engine or they're using a new system, so it's going to take them longer because everyone in the department
knows what
has to learn how to use it and then get good at it. Like you can't just know how to use it. You got to get good at it so you know how to fix the problems. I learned about vertical slice, which I didn't know. I'm learning a lot of terms in this book about game development that I didn't know, which is like a demo, but it's like the first couple minutes to half an hour of your game that you send to like publishers and stuff to show them how you're doing.
It's like trailers where sometimes it has nothing to do with your movie.
Just slice the game. It's like at the beginning though.
Yeah.
So that does have something to do with your
game.
But
sometimes it doesn't make it.
Maybe, well, I used to say that the beginning of games are always good because that's the demo that they give at E3, and then the end of the game is when stuff falls apart because they don't expect people to get that far in the game. To be honest, people don't finish video games.
That's true.
So the beginning is going to be like, honestly, your best part. Most likely. Because that's the thing they showed you at E3 in the demo they gave out. What were you going to say? My next thing is they had to delay the game. Surprise.
Oh, I have that too. Oh, this was the first time that I saw, and this happened several other times in the book, that they are really relying on feedback. And that was one of the big things on Kickstarter is that they, sometimes they go to Reddit boards and stuff, but they were really getting individual feedback from the people that were funding them and the things that they wanted to see in the game. So they really built the game for the customer who was paying for it. And I felt out of all of the crowdfunding ones that they were more appreciative of the money that they got from the people.
It's probably because they were so reluctant to do it in the first place.
Yeah, but they were really like, well, these are our customers, and like this is what they want, so let's
It's a good game.
Let's give them what they asked for.
It seems like developers in this game, they really thrive on E3 hype too, and trailer hype.
I think that's a big market for them. We'll see later that like YouTube and obviously like game like Twitch streamers and stuff is a big market for them because it allows them to get their name out there. But E3 is not only for reporters and industry standards, but it's televised and a lot of people watch it and people go there. So it's the next big game. So even if you're a smaller industry and you can get in next to, the next Ubisoft game, like people are watching for Ubisoft, but then they see your game because it's part of it as well.
People are watching for Ubisoft.
That's me.
Just kidding.
I'm waiting for my next Assassin's Creed game because I'm done with Valhalla.
That's all I have for Pose of Eternity, to be honest. Do you have anything else?
They
funded it, by the way.
They did. They made it.
It's out.
And then they're like,
they made a second one also.
They started their own crowdfunding, which is called Fig, for the sequel. So they started on Kickstarter, and then they did another crowdfunding on their own. Which first is smart for them because then they don't have to pay Kickstarter 5% of their fees. That's true.
Did they own Fig?
Yeah.
Oh, and Fig is what Double Fine used for Psychonauts 2. So that's kind of fun. That's fun because they saw them do it for Broken Age and now they like work together. Is Fig still around? I think Fig shut down.
I couldn't tell you. We're gonna ask the Magic Answer Box.
Ask the Magic Answer Box.
But yeah, so I think that's definitely Obsidian learned from their mistakes and then learned from the things from the past. And I felt like this chapter was was a good first chapter for this book because it was very informative and a good peek into the industry and what it takes kind of to start your own game from scratch. And they were kind of a lot of industries. They base what their new game is going to be based off the money that they made from their previous game, and like that helps fund it. And so now that they didn't have a studio or production company helping them fund it, crowdsourcing and really being aware of how much it was going to cost them, I feel like they were more financially responsible than some of these other corporations that we're like, oh no, we need another year and another $10,000 or $10 million. And I think when we look at video games and find out how much they're worth, and then you look at how much it took to make it, it's a lot of money to make these games.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of work. It's rough. So Fig is still around. It's called Republic now, though. But yeah, you can fund a lot of games on here. Cool. I might look at that later.
Support the industry.
Yeah, so that's Pillars of Eternity.
Next is Uncharted 4.
Yep.
This chapter was really about crunch because...
Well, that's what Jason Schreier is known for.
Yeah.
His investigative journalism into crunch.
But also Ubisoft, Naughty Dog. Oh my gosh, I'm stuck on Ubisoft. Ubisoft's not even in this book.
No, they're not. I don't even think they talk about them.
Naughty Dog started off as a smaller company, and then, of course, with success comes expansion. And we have Jack and
Naughty
Daxter.
Dog embraces crunch, is what I wrote, which is interesting. I like how they were talking about Naughty Dog and they're like, they use black magic to make their games look so good. Nobody knows how they do it. But Naughty Dog has been making
a lot of work.
Great engines forever. Like Jack and Daxter's, I think engine was used in Ratchet and Clank from Insomniac because their engines were just so good.
Yeah.
Jack and Daxter was the first game that I played that had day-night cycle and it was amazing. I was like, this is so cool. It's nighttime now and now it's daytime. And like I just hung out in the village area and just watched the sun go down.
This game. Oh my gosh, what is wrong with me today? I don't know what's happening. This chapter is really about not necessarily the Uncharted series, but in particular Uncharted 4. So there are 3 games previous to this who had really good commercial success. They were on the PlayStation 3, and then Uncharted 4 was the game for PlayStation 4. Naughty Dog is PlayStation exclusive, And the graphics on Uncharted
Soon to
4...
be not anymore, because they're on PC.
Yeah, that's okay. The graphics on Uncharted 4 to this day are freaking amazing. Like, I just played it again. They're so detailed. But we saw definitely a break between the Uncharted 1 through 3 and then this reboot of Uncharted 4, because we lost Henning, who was the main person for the first 3 games. She
creative
leaves,
differences.
which I felt like there was more to the story than what was actually portrayed in the chapter, because you have Druckmann and Stanley, who do fantastic work. Last of Us is just what they were responsible for. Is an amazing game and great story. It's very dark compared to the early Uncharted games.
Their team took too much.
They took all the people from Uncharted
so they were working on Uncharted 4 and the first Last of Us like at the same time, and the Last of Us had too much staff, and Uncharted 4 had like barely any, which people think that's part of the reason why Amy left, was because they're just,
there you can definitely feel the underlying story that is she got screwed, and Last of Us took all of her crew, and so she didn't have enough, and she couldn't make this game that she was trying to make, and so she left. That's kind of the story that I got from reading it. And then they're like, guess what, Last of Us people, we just lost our creative director, so tag you're it. And they were like, what? We just finished this game.
We just finished Last of Us. We are tired and burnt out. And what was interesting to me was it Stanley got a new apartment near Santa Monica Studio so he could crunch more on Uncharted.
Because the driving was taking too much time, so...
A whole new apartment. Making bank at Naughty Dog.
Yeah, Santa Monica's not cheap, so... The story that Henning had originally for Uncharted 4, which he talks about, where Sam is still the brother.
He's the bad guy.
But he's the bad guy in the story.
Which makes sense, because he's a bad guy.
Sam sucks. However, Alan Tudyk was supposed to do the voice for Sam, and I feel like we got gypped a little bit.
Yeah,
because I love me some Alan Tudyk. He is amazing, and yet we got Troy Baker. Which, I mean...
The Troy Baker hater over here.
Troy Baker is in like every freaking game.
Not anymore.
I appreciate Troy Baker. He's a great voice actor.
He's a good voice actor. They just had him on deck because of The Last of Us, so they were like, yeah, we'll just use him.
Yeah.
Maybe Alan was busy. I don't know.
Doing all those
Disney
Pixar movies.
Making balking sounds and noises.
But, and then, Rafe was supposed to be part of the prison, and then, so they definitely changed up the story from what it originally was. I feel like it needed it. Uncharted 4 is definitely a lot darker than Uncharted 3 when it comes to storytelling, and like...
This game got delayed twice.
I feel like that was because of
the second reason was really funny, because it was like, Sony Europe for distribution was like, can we have the game 3 days early? And they were like, no, we have to crunch. And we're trying to, and so they were like, we can't give it to you. And they're like, we can't distribute it. So then they had to delay it again because of that.
Yeah, 3 days. I mean, 3 days is important at the end. Don't ever ask for anything early.
Yeah, quality control.
But it was also, they wrote the whole script beforehand, which they said was unheard of, which, I mean, this is the second chapter of this book, and I'm like, what do you mean writing the whole script is unheard of before you start a game?
It really
that
seems
makes
like
sense.
They just make scripts as they go. You can see why a lot of these games, particularly like Destiny and like Dragon Age Inquisition, the story is rough, and it's because they basically had to rewrite stuff and like keep
all
going
the time.
as they go.
But this also reminded me, if you watch the documentary on Disney Plus about Frozen 2, like, they made Frozen 2 without knowing what the story was until the end of the freaking movie. That surprised
That's why Frozen 2 is so bad.
That surprised me so much. I'm like, don't you have a script before you start storyboarding? Apparently not. I know nothing about any of these industries, because I would assume you had at least a basis of a story.
Animated movies, you shouldn't be able to do that with, because there should everything is pre-production. You gotta draw it and do it, and then that's why all the like cut content's all this drawn stuff most of the time.
Yeah, but don't you have
live action movies? You can just flip it like that.
Dialogue in a story.
You can just come in and be like, "Can you just come back in?" The director decided to change his mind, and you can just do that. But games, I don't know enough about the process where you can just go back in. I guess you could just re-record audio and then have people make new things, but it seems harder.
Yeah, but again, like, this is the first chapter where, like, there's no story, and then it's like every chapter after this about every game is like, there's no story. We had to rewrite this game like 4 years into production.
Basically, because they had a perfectionism problem. They were like, perfect is the enemy of good, and art is never finished. It's just abandoned.
That is
so they
true.
basically just kind of they were like, we have to ship Uncharted 4. We're abandoning it.
Yeah, they had to patch it, but
big day one patches.
Yeah. Uncharted 4, they said, became about addiction, greed, and paranoia, which I feel like part of the story was definitely what they were feeling.
Well, yeah, the beginning of the chapter quote was video games like most are reflections of their creators.
Yeah, it definitely felt like it was what was happening in the studio, which is why it's technically the last Uncharted game, because it's the last story about Nathan Drake. Although fans are like, there's going to be another Uncharted.
It's not going to be about Nathan Drake, though.
No, which you don't need to, because there's so many awesome side characters.
He's done.
I thought there's a quote that I wrote that I was definitely like, I feel seen, where they say, in the middle of the intense combat encounter, there was nothing more frustrating than slipping to your death because you pressed the wrong button. Hello, Uncharted. Like, how many times do I press the wrong button when I'm jumping? Or, like, he jumps too far. And I'm like, well, thank you. Because there's a part in Uncharted 4 where you're climbing and you slip on everything you climb, which Nathan Drake's, notorious for breaking things, but it's so frustrating. So, and luckily they're like, yeah, let's get rid of that, because Henning was like, she wanted to redo all the combat, and like, she wanted the first part of the game you actually weren't shooting anyone, because it doesn't make sense for Nathan Drake to be a mass murderer like he is. But they kept some of that, but they definitely changed it up.
They use little narrative dissonance with Uncharted all the time. Yeah. That's why they made him sneak more and stuff in the fourth game. And I think it's fine. It's a video game.
I felt like that, especially with Uncharted, and it shows how important the story is to drive game development. And it was just so interesting to me that is not a thing in this industry. Like, it's not about story. It's not about the story that you're going to tell. It's about, like, the fighting that you want to do, or the main character, or...
1313 had a thing about this, where they were like, with film, it's driven by the story, basically, but in video games, it's driven by the gameplay. Mm-hmm. So you can't just care about story, you also have to care of if it's fun to play.
Yeah. Well, it's also because, like, a lot of the games, when you have a lot of cutscenes, like, that's storytelling versus, like, I would rather play the game than watch the game. So I understand that.
There's a lot of games where it's just watching the game, but some people like that too. It depends.
But yeah, this chapter is definitely about crunch. So some argue that crunch represents failure of leadership and project management. Others wonder how games can be made without it.
Honestly, I think every industry has crunch.
Yeah, it also, to me, that is such, like, a toxic work environment where it is the rule instead of the exception, where that's why you have project managers who oversee, and that's why you have companies like Microsoft who put deadlines and then, like, actually ask you to report what you're doing.
Honestly, if you
so that you're on schedule.
These game developers deadlines, they just keep working on it forever, like the Stardew Valley guy in chapter 3.
Yeah.
If you're not given a thing, they'll just they're perfectionists.
Perfectionists.
And workaholics, and they'll just be like, it's not good enough. There's too many bugs.
Also, technology changes so quickly that everything that you start off with has to be adapted later on, or has to be, patched, or because of the different systems that it's on, or the graphic cards and stuff like that. So you can never have perfection with a game because things change.
Yeah, constantly.
I'll continue talking about Uncharted 4. No, that's the end. But yeah, toxic system, really, this is why films have project managers. This is why other people have administration, is to make sure that there is a deadline, and that that's quite a bit of people's jobs. And there are directors for video games. Didn't have anything else to say about Uncharted.
Yeah, enough about Uncharted 4. That's game news. I don't care. Stardew Valley is something I care about because I was kind of mad about this. Listen,
I also so this chapter is about a solo indie game developer.
yes. And I
this game
used to think that is cool. Like at the end of the day, we both have something in common. We both love Harvest Moon. We both wanted more. Stardew Valley brought an uptick of farming games, which I am appreciative of because Stardew Valley is good. I have over 500 hours on it.
Wow.
But
I don't think I ever have any of that.
I went insane. But the way that this guy, Eric, went about it, I'm a little bit disappointed.
It started where he was like, I don't know what kind of job I want after college, so I want to give these next couple months to start a game. Mm-hmm. And then 4 years later, he was like, well, maybe I should finally publish this game.
Yeah, his girlfriend worked 2 jobs to support him making this game. He knew how to write music and really well, so that's why the music in Stardew Valley slaps. He had issues with scheduling, and he just kept making the game bigger and bigger.
And then he had burnout, which he was like,
really bad.
I'm the only one working on this game. I'm working on it for hours each day. I don't want to work on it anymore, which is why you have like teams of people who
but he
can help you.
Doesn't want to work in a team, and I think that's fine. Games are cool in the fact that you can make a pretty dope game on your own, all by yourself, if you wanted to. I mean, look at the guy who made Undertale. He just made that all on his own, and it's amazing. Like film, you can't really do that. Where you're gonna pull like a?
I mean, I guess you could animate.
You play everybody in it, and then you
one-man show.
Yeah,
John Leguizamo does it all the time.
It would be bad. It would be a terrible thing, but you can just make a game on your own if you want to.
But then he was like, screw this, I'm gonna make a phone game, and then he's like, I don't really want to do that.
Well, he did. He made the phone game. He made Surfer Pair or whatever, and he tried to finish a game, I think, to keep him back, which I get it. You want to work on another project to keep your mind off of it. The thing that bothered me was that he purposefully told people that it would only take a couple months, so they'd like basically get off his back when he knew it would take longer. And he was like, that might have been a little bit manipulative of me, but it all worked out in the end. And I was like, don't say that. Yeah. That makes you look like a bad guy.
I also wrote that he knew it was going to take years, but only was like, oh, it's only going to take a couple months. Oh, it's only going to take a couple more months.
Well, he rebuilt and rewrote that game a bunch of times. Yeah. Like the sprites he used, he rebuilt those constantly. He did show off his thing, and Chucklefish, the publisher, asked to publish it. Actually, he recently split from Chucklefish, so I wonder what happened there.
I feel like they were super supportive of him, though, because they're like, yeah, we'll PR your game, and they let him take as much time as he needed, and they did a lot of work for him, I feel like.
He also went to PAX. People loved his game. PAX is a big deal. And this other part made me kind of mad was, so he published the game, it's a huge success, he's now a millionaire, he has so much money,
$15 million,
and he's like, apparently making money leaves you with guilt and depression. Like,
I felt like honestly Schreier gave a lot of excuses for Baron's insecurities. Like, he was very nice to Baron, where I feel like other writers would have been like, dude, get over yourself.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's so hard to have so much money. You don't understand how guilty you feel. And I was like, why don't you pull up Bill Gates and just give all your money to charity if you feel that guilty about it? You know? Like, come on. It's fine. You have a bunch of money. Stop being a weakling about it.
I think it was more the fact that now that his game was successful, he was feeling pressure to do it all again. But again, burnout is a huge thing where...
He is making another game called The Haunted Chocolatier.
Oh.
It's not about bug catching, like the end of this chapter would make you believe. It's about running a chocolate shop in a town that's haunted, which is cool.
That's Haunted Chocolatier. That's what it sounds like.
Well, I just wanted to help.
Yeah. All right.
I won't explain anything anymore. Jeez. The creator of Harvest Moon asked to hang out with him, which I am jealous of.
Nice.
That was very cool.
Yeah, he was like, I'm glad someone like really liked my game enough to make their own. Like, that was nice.
He really brought back Harvest Moon, to be honest. There's now Story of Seasons, Harvest Moon. There's a bunch of indie games on Steam. And I really appreciate what he did for the farming game market.
Yeah, I'm not really into farming games. Because I'm utilized.
I don't care, at least. Diablo 3. We're moving on.
Diablo 3, I felt like, was really about being stuck on the last game's shadow or structure. So we're in Blizzard. That's the studio that does Diablo 3. And this is where you get the error 37.
This was funny. So they launched Diablo 3 and nobody could play it because the servers were down, and the Diablo 3 team was like partying somewhere else, and they had to like
no one knew.
No one knew.
No one texted them and was like, "Hey dude, you need to come back because no one can play your game."
I guess somebody did eventually. Can you imagine in the middle of your like party, you're like, yeah, I launched a game, and then you get a text that's like nobody can play it, and you all have to like stop your party and like run back to the offices.
That's a bummer. But no, yeah, they couldn't play the game. I said, and they're all partying it up, which I'm like, that's embarrassing.
That's fun. No, everyone parties after you launch a game.
I know, but the fact that they're partying for a game that they finished that no one can play, I was like,
they didn't know. Give them a break. The Diablo 3 team is funny to me because they made it pay to win because apparently people wanted it too hard, but then people also wanted it easy. So their solution to that was make it pay to win.
Which angered quite a few people.
It angers a lot of people. Ubisoft, speaking of, does that with Assassin's Creed.
Everyone hates that.
And you can pay $20 to get extra EXP and extra money.
But let's be honest, if you're actually playing the game, you level up on Assassin's Creed so quickly that you don't.
As somebody who bought that, it really helped me finish the game faster when I was playing Odyssey. So, okay, this whole moral of the Diablo 3 story was they realized that people didn't like Diablo 2. They liked Diablo 2 with the expansion pack, because a lot of games have this problem where they launch their garbage, you give them an expansion pack, and everyone's like, all is forgiven. This game is the best. And that was their moral to that story, was they just worked on an expansion pack for Diablo 3 that would fix everything and like add stuff and make it better, and they took away pay to win, and they were like, that's the way to do it, and then everyone forgives them, and we're all happy, and they just did the same thing that Diablo 2 did.
Also, they continue to work on games decades after they have released it. I said, that seems a little extra. What's wrong with your game? But the question I have, does Blizzard not use QA testers?
No, I think they do.
Because that was a lot of the errors that they were having, is like, oh yeah, and then other people were saying that they can't do this. I'm like, that's the whole quality assurance testers. Like, a lot of the problems that they kept coming up with, I'm like, that's literally what those people do.
They find bugs, yeah.
And I was confused.
I feel like maybe a lot of departments use QA, like they use the team, or like in the Dragon Age one, they just send it home with the developers over the break to see what they think of it. I don't know. I don't work at Blizzard. I like how they said everyone has a different version of the game in their head, which I think is also true.
That's very true. Yeah.
Every game, you're just gonna have a different interpretation of it, and you just gotta deal with that. But I thought that was funny. It's basically, they created an expansion pack, everyone will forgive you. Mm-hmm. They did the same thing with Destiny, which we'll get to later. That's all I have for Diablo 3.
Halo Wars.
Halo Wars.
This chapter is, I labeled copying other games.
What's wrong with what?
Because they wanted to... There's a bunch of games.
People do that all the time.
That they're like, we want to make this game.
Doom clones.
Yeah.
Diablo clones. Halo clones.
But that's why it's such a big thing. And they're like, I like this game, but I want to make my own version of it.
People do that with movies all the time.
Stardew Valley. Yeah. But that's what I felt like this chapter really was about.
And they were like,
Ensemble Studios.
We really don't want to make a, what is it, RTS.
They did the Age of Empires is what they're known for. But that was the weird confliction I feel like in this chapter, is that there was some hardcore Empire people who were like, that's what we do, and then there are people like, I don't want to do that anymore, and like that there was a conflict within the studio of how they should make this look. And so they were given Halo.
They've had that problem before, like in the Destiny chapter.
Yeah,
same with like Old Blood being like, I want to try something new, and New Blood being like, we literally came to work for you because we like RTSs, you know?
Yeah. So they were given Halo, but Halo belongs to another company.
Yeah.
I felt like that
Well,
That's a little sketch.
so they were making another game called Phoenix, and they had this cool lore and backstory, and they liked it. And Microsoft was like, "Yeah, cool, Can you make it a Halo instead?" And everyone was super bummed because they created all this lore and backstory for Phoenix that they had to now change to Halo, which is not just an asset flip. It's a whole big thing. They had to learn about Halo lore and stuff.
Yeah, it's super. Halo is kind of detailed.
Kind of.
Well, I mean, like the basic story for Halo is very simple, but there's so much to the world around it that other companies have developed, and they're like, here, do this now.
I mean, they went over to the Bungie studio, and Bungie had no idea that they were making a Halo RTS, and Bungie felt kind of betrayed by Microsoft because they're like, "You're just giving our IP out to whomever."
And Microsoft's like, yeah, because we own the IP.
Yeah, so
Deal with it.
I thought it was cute that they tried to like they try to be nice to Bungie.
Work
Obviously,
together,
there's a problem. They made travel brochures that like was about the planets that they were gonna make in Halo Wars, and they sent it to them, and they're just trying to be a little cute and nice. Like, are we allowed to make this planet? Like, here's our brochure.
Yeah.
They called it whoring out their franchise. It's just funny.
Yeah, and I also write, of course, people who own Halo wouldn't want them to use Master Chief because they weren't allowed to use Master Chief.
Yeah.
Because again, especially with this huge.
But they let him use it for that TV show that's bombing. Yeah. So.
A huge.
Womp womp.
Well, that's because I think Bungie's like they don't own Halo anymore. It's still Microsoft. Own Halo.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's 343 Studios now.
But. If that is your main game and that is what you're known for, like anything like that from books, movies, and that you can make it within the world, but don't use my intellectual property.
They were also working on a Halo MMO at the same time. They worked on another MMO and then they just decided to turn it into Halo, kind of like what they were doing with the other thing.
Do you know what I wrote down?
What?
Too many Master Chiefs in the kitchen.
Oh my god. Microsoft canceled their MMO because they were like, "Why are you working on an MMO? We told you to work on this RTS." And they're like, "But we wanted to do something other than an RTS." And Microsoft's like, "Too bad. That's what you're known for. You're the Age of Empires people."
And then HR showed up. So that's how I also read. Like, it's never good when HR shows up because...
You guys have to all come in early. Microsoft's executives are coming in today. That means we're all getting shut down.
Yeah, it was super cold of Microsoft to hire another studio to do the sequel after closing down the original studio.
Yeah.
And so they, Ensemble Studios ended up breaking off because they closed. And they ended up becoming Robot. I'm like, why wouldn't you just hire that studio then?
I don't know. There's so many, like...
Microsoft has a bad reputation
making a new studio or, like... switching off and having to join other studios, and there's so many studios out there.
Yeah, I feel like studios, there's quite a few that don't make it very long.
Yeah.
But then they end up just closing and
they had to finish Halo Wars even though their studio was shutting down after the game was made.
That's hard.
That's rough. They did finish it. I did play it. It's pretty good.
It sounded good. Like, it sounded like a good concept. But I much rather would have played the Phoenix game.
I didn't know enough about the Phoenix game, so... But I played both Halo Wars to get ready for Halo Infinite, and yeah, they're both pretty good. Sad that the studio had to shut down.
I don't even know if Robot's around.
Created by the founders of the defunct Ensemble Studios after being shut down by Microsoft. Oh yeah, they make the Orcs Must Die series. Yep, they're still around.
Alright, now we are in Dragon Age Inquisition. And this chapter is about game engines and the trouble you have when you have to redo your game.
So this chapter starts off with them being like, EA won worst U.S. company 2 years in a row. So, starting off strong. Apparently people didn't like Dragon Age 2 and Mass Effect 3. So, and fans thought it was EA's fault, but I don't know what you're talking about. Straight whack dog, because Dragon Age 2 was dope.
I didn't mind. I think the big thing with Mass Effect 3 was the ending. That's what people didn't like, that you had to make a choice, but it didn't matter.
Dragon Age 2 had the best companions I've ever had in a game, ever. They were so interesting. Anyway, enough about gushing about Dragon Age 2. I loved it. I played that one, and then I played Inquisition. Inquisition was a hot mess in comparison, and now I know why. Because of this chapter.
Well, a lot of the EA problems was also the pay to play.
They actually were planning on making Inquisition before, like basically Inquisition was going to be 2. But then their MMO SWOTOR, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic or whatever, was got stalled, so they were like, you have to release a game in between.
In 1 year.
In a year.
You need to create this whole new game.
And they made Dragon Age 2. And people were like, seems rushed. And I'm like, yeah, no, duh.
If you've ever played Dragon Age, that isn't a involved game. There's multiple
Dragon Age
creatures.
2, you only played as one human character. You couldn't pick your race like you could in Origin. So obviously it's going to be smaller than Origins.
Making a full-length video game in a year, though, seems ridiculous.
Yeah. I like how they call the Dragon Age team the pirate ship, because they get where they need to go, but there are a few pit stops along the way, and they're also extremely chaotic, which is funny.
Which they also said they took the pirate ship as like a positive, and they probably
meant it as a negative.
Yeah. They rewrote the narrative on that.
Yeah, they were struggling because they had to make a game on new consoles with new gameplay and a new engine and make it the biggest game they've ever made, because people were being a whiny little baby about Dragon Age 2, and the art team was having a blast, apparently. They were living it up.
So Frostbite is the engine that they made it on, which is very art-friendly, but...
Yeah, it was a new engine they used for Battlefield games, so it wasn't made for RPGs, it was made for first-person shooters. So third-person anything and companion mechanics were rough.
So they had to basically rebuild everything.
They made Andromeda on Frostbite, too.
Oh, that game was kind of... There's a lot of glitches in that one.
It's funny when people are like, Andromeda's faces are weird, and I'm like, did you play Inquisition? Did you play... Dragon Age Inquisition won Game of the Year, and that has... the same engine with the same face problems. I don't think you're allowed to be like, Andromeda sucks if you like Inquisition. I'm sorry.
Andromeda is different, I think, than the 3, which is why people had issues.
It's because more people play Mass Effect than Dragon Age.
Yeah, sci-fi versus fantasy.
EA wanted to make themselves look good, so they let them like delay the game a couple more times, which is nice.
But also ridiculous to make a game in a year.
Oh, I'm talking about Inquisition. Yeah. I'm not talking about 2 anymore. 2 was made in a year. Inquisition was made over time.
Oh, yeah.
They had a trailer at PAX, and apparently nothing from that PAX trailer ended up in the game. And the Dragon Age people were like, we honestly thought we were going to put that stuff in the game, but it just didn't come to fruition. It's not out of malice. Like, we just couldn't do it in time. I learned that blocking is when a developer can't get work done because they need something from someone else.
Yeah.
When I heard of blocking, I thought, like, stage blocking, like moving characters around.
No, this is like you're being blocked by what you're trying to do. Yeah.
The people at the company didn't like the story of Dragon Age Inquisition, so they had to rewrite the whole first act. And, okay, if you played Inquisition, you know that the first act sucks. So you're stuck in the Hinterlands, and they didn't expect you to do all the side quests in the Hinterlands, which is really weird, because they give you a lot of quests to do in the Hinterlands. And
didn't they do that on purpose so that you could...
I did all the quests in the Hinterlands. Side quests also. And I was there for a long time, and I was like, dang, this intro is long. And once you get out of the Hinterlands is when the game really picks up and starts to get good. So if you don't like Dragon Age Inquisition, I recommend getting out of the Hinterlands for sure. And what was also funny was that 8 months from ship, they didn't have a way to recruit one of the companions, Iron Bull, which is funny. So they had like he's a companion with the companion dialogue, but they didn't have a way to recruit him. So they had to fix that. Like, this game was a hot mess. You can tell from the first act of this game that got rewritten a bunch of times. And also, sorry, I always talk about Dragon Age Inquisition. I didn't have anyone to talk to about this for a long time. So I started the game off because they added races later on. So at first, they only wanted you to be a human, which is kind of how Dragon Age 2 was.
Yeah, I mean, because in Origins, especially, we played Origins as the dwarf, so we got hated on, like, everywhere we went.
But Origins is cool because they give you, like, that whole tutorial related to what your race is. In this game, they were going to have you just be a human, but then they added races later. So I started as an elf because I didn't play as an elf yet. I played as a dwarf in the first one, then I played as a human, then I was like, I'm going to go elf. But the whole intro to this game, they were like, an elf? Are you sure? Like, elves shouldn't have this ability. And I was like, am I not supposed to be an elf? Like, did I mess up? Do I have to switch my race? And I looked it up, and people were like, it was written to be a human. So I was like, so I switched and I became a human. And I was like, maybe elf for second playthrough, who knows? And it turns out that was the case. It was written for you to be a human. So if you were a Kunari or an elf or a dwarf, it was just weird. And everyone in the story was like, why?
But didn't they rewrite the beginning of it? So shouldn't they have rewritten that?
You would think. That game makes you feel really bad for picking anything other than a human being.
Well, we felt really bad as a dwarf because we just got hated on the whole time.
Yeah, because dwarves can't romance anybody. Why is that a thing?
Same.
That's so ridiculous. Anyway, Dragon Age Inquisition, hot mess. The intro sequence is a hot mess, and I can see why, because they had to rewrite it a bunch of times. And get out of the Hinterlands. Do it. You can always go back to the Hinterlands. I need you to go back to your fort and wait for when you switch forts. Then you're in the meat and potatoes of Inquisition. Next chapter.
Shovel Knight.
Shovel Knight.
Okay, I'm gonna be a hater on this chapter for real.
So tell me,
I have never played this game.
Why do you hate Yacht Club games?
But
What'd they do to you?
These bros were super irritating to me.
What'd they do?
Let's start with their Kickstarter campaign.
Okay.
So first of all, they all worked for a studio and they didn't like the way. So Way Forward is the studio that they all used to work for, and Velasco didn't like the fact that Way Forward would put you into a group where they needed you. He was like, screw that, I want to hang out with my bros, instead of doing what you're actually paid to do. And so that, at first I was like,
it's funny that they're Velasco. In a studio that like basically made like shovelware games, yes. Which is a little bit ironic.
So they decided they didn't like to be told what to do. And so they decided to break off and make their own game. But a game that was basically a copy. They wanted to make the next Mario Brothers. And
but
they
then
wanted
they
to
made Mega Man instead.
Yeah, they made Mega Man instead.
Which is funny.
And they wanted to be super like famous, and they had merchandising in mind before they even figured out what their game was.
They just dreamed big. You never dreamed big before?
I'm a story person. So, like, come up with the story first, and then come up with your merchandising.
There is a story.
But
you're Shovel Knight, and you have to take out the other knights.
So they also started a Kickstarter because...
They kidnapped your girlfriend. You didn't play Shovel Knight, you don't understand.
I did not.
Your Shield Knight is your girlfriend, and she's taken, and you gotta fight all these other knights.
So it's Mario Brothers.
It's Mega Man.
I love Mega Man, and
What's the plot of Mega Man?
You have to...
Huh?
I haven't played Mega Man forever.
You fight a bunch of robots because they're evil to get to the robot masters.
I thought, don't you have to like release your like do bro friends or whatever?
No,
I forgot what Mega Man was about.
If you're talking about his like, is her name Rolo or whatever?
Here's
like his sister.
There is an actual plot to
She
Mega
doesn't
Man.
know.
I haven't played it in probably 20 years, so I
guess which Mega Man? I need to be more specific.
Yeah, that is
Mega
true.
Man 2? What's the plot of Mega Man 2?
I can't tell you. I don't even remember. I can tell you what like the song was, but I can't remember what the freaking game was about. So they started, anyways, back to the Yacht Club bros. They started their Kickstarter at $75,000, but really they needed twice that amount. And they knew that they needed twice that amount, but they didn't know what they were doing. And so
if you put too big of a number, then people aren't going to do it. That's Kickstarter 101, though.
But also, they didn't know what they were doing on Kickstarter in the first place. They had to go ask other people for help about their Kickstarter campaigns after they started, because they're like, oh, wait, we're only at, like, $50,000. We need $75,000.
Someone who was working on their film wanted $50,000 for a film, for like, their independent film. And I was like, that's too much. Nobody's going to give you that kind of money, and they didn't get anything.
Ooh. But again, we know from this chapter, and they should know from the company that they worked for, how much it costs to make a game.
Well, they're making shovelware games.
Yeah.
Which is slightly different.
Which they were like, it's going to be cheaper to make. Uh-huh. But at the same time, they knew kind of about the time period that they had, and that they were all equal partners.
Yeah, their studio was interesting because they were like, if one of us has an idea and one of us doesn't like it, we have to have a discussion. And if all of us don't agree, then we're not going to implement it, which is chaotic.
But they also
and they didn't have a lead.
They didn't have a lead, but they all had a speciality. So they all naturally go to certain types of things that they're making. But yeah, they're still today finding difficulties with the fact that they are a pure democracy without a lead.
They did really good at marketing, I feel, because they reached out to a guy at IGN who they thought would like their game, and he did. Right? They were like,
they harassed him.
They didn't harass. They sent him an email.
Mm-hmm.
Moriarty's fine. I know him. I don't know him, but I've listened to his podcasts. And they sent out to the Game Grumps, which is where I heard about Shovel Knight. Was I watched the Game Grumps play it?
Well, that's because that was the advice that they got from other people, where they're like, you have to update your Kickstarter. And they're like, really? And they're like, yeah, dude, what are you doing? And then they're like, you need to advertise to other people. So they sent it out to a bunch of Twitch streamers and YouTubers. That I wrote a lot in capital letters on this because I was kind of irritated with them. Again, they were thinking about merchandising and fame or notoriety before the actual game. And then they're like, well, let's make it a shovel. And then someone's like, well, let's make it a knight. And then they're like, okay, so a knight that has a shovel. I'm like,
they wanted because I watched the No Clip documentary on these guys before reading this chapter, where they said they wanted a game where you could like flip the enemy over and then like jump on it and stab its tummy, and they were like the only weapon we could think of was a shovel, and I was like, I guess, and also a spear maybe, but like I guess you couldn't flip someone over the spear anyway. It's a weird, very precise thing they wanted to do.
The other thing that I put in capital letters has to do with them because was it PAX that they were going to play this game?
They went to PAX, yeah.
And originally they weren't going to have a demo. They were just going to have other games for people to play there and like a link to like their Kickstarter and be like, hey, come. But eventually they actually did have their demo to play, which I'm like, that's kind of what you needed. They were backing more on like the vibe that they put out. But then before they left, he's like, yeah, I was making coffee, and then like coffee grounds came out of the sink, and we're like, too bad, we have to go, so just leave it. I'm like, dude, first of all, here's life advice: don't put coffee grounds down the sink. Why is this in this chapter?
Because they were saying how frantic their trip to PAX was, because they had to go to Boston. So they went to the Boston PAX, so they had to take a flight.
And share a hotel room.
And then share a hotel room because they were poor. PAX is expensive, especially if you have to fly to Boston or Seattle. Those are the two PAX locations. I like how they call themselves Yacht Club because it was ironic because they were poor.
They had like IKEA furniture. But now their yacht club is actually looking over a dock.
Yeah.
But they raised a lot of money thanks to other people. Really, this game probably would not have been made if it wasn't for other people.
Yeah, and then they had, after they finished the project and it was successful, they had their post-project depression and imposter syndrome, because they were like, we literally just tricked everybody into buying Mega Man.
Yes.
And stuff, and they felt bad about it.
But that's what they were going for in the first place, which I didn't understand. And this quote, which I also found irritating, because he found him, Velasco, found himself disoriented, like a felon going free after a long prison sentence.
What's mad about that?
They're not incarcerated. This is something they chose for themselves. Why are you comparing the two things? Yes, this is also about crunch, because guess what? When you're an independent small business, you are working all of the time. It's not just games. Like, talk to any small business owner. Their job, honestly, their business is their life.
Ballsy move to quit your job to make a game that you believe in. Like, I respect that, but like, because if I was going to make a game, I wouldn't quit my job. I'd work on the game at the same time as working. But since you worked at a studio, sometimes in your agreements, it says like you can't work. If you work on another game, then it's owned by that studio.
Yeah, it's their time that they're paying for.
I'm assuming, well, they're not like after work. You know what I mean? Like after work hours, if I come home and make a game, sometimes your contract says that they still own that.
Yeah.
Because it's your creative work. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what they were.
But also, it was signed. A footnote, which should have been a larger thing. That way, what's the name of that? Way Forward, or found,
way forward. Yeah,
Yeah, they lent them technology
they
and
did.
stuff.
They were very nice to them
they
about
were
it.
very nice to them about it.
They went. They had a lot of Kickstarter promises that they had to do like campaigns involving the other knights.
In order to get the money that they actually needed, they're like, well, if we make 150,000, then we'll have another boss battle. And so 2.5 years after the game released, they're still trying to.
They finished recently, I think.
Yeah.
And now they're like, we're done with Shovel Knight. We have to make something else.
Well, that was the other thing, is because it was a Kickstarter promise, they were giving it out for free. But then they're like, we've been working on this for 2.5 years. We now we basically have 4 different games. So we're going to charge now for it.
But yeah, if you bought Shovel Knight originally, I think you get the free updates.
Yeah.
But if you buy Shovel Knight now, it comes in like a set. So it's a little more expensive because it's 4 campaigns, which makes sense.
That does make sense.
I'm not mad at that, but yeah. So they're sick of Shovel Knight and they want to be like Nintendo, which, you know.
Which they want multiple IPs.
They do. They made Mega Man, which is not a Nintendo game. And now they want to make Zelda. They said they made their Mario, but then it's not really.
It's Mega Man.
Yeah, that's Shovel Knight.
And this brings us to Destiny. Which this is also in the shadow of a former success, which was Halo. So this is Bungie, and Bungie won their independence from Microsoft in 2007. And the quote that I have is, "You have to be careful what you wish for."
Ain't that the truth?
Because it's one thing, again, you have a parent company. They fund a lot of what you do, but they also keep you on track.
It's funny because Bungie's now owned by Activision.
Yes.
So they just, out of one fire into the next pan, or whatever it's called.
From the
pan
into the fire.
Yeah, so it's funny that they wanted to get as far away from Halo as possible. But then they turned Destiny into basically Halo because they were like, okay, let's get away from sci-fi. We'll do fantasy. But all of their artists knew how to only do sci-fi. So basically they made a sci-fantasy and they're like, fine, that's fine.
And then it ended up being sci-fi because the fantasy people lost.
And they're like, we don't want to do a shooter. We want to do something different because Halo. But all of their engine people only knew how to make shooters. So they're like, okay, fine, I guess we could do a shooter. Maybe an MMO in space, you know, like.
So you had basically 2 people who came up with ideas for games. I felt like the Dragon Tavern sounded
cool.
Cool.
Yeah, can we bring that back, please?
And he lost out because the main person of Bungie, who's Jones, right? There's a bunch of names in this chapter.
I didn't write down any names.
And so he's like a recluse, but basically he has final say. Which they were like, that's why we don't like Microsoft. Because they had final say, but then it ended up, they were only going to make one game, and so Dragon Tavern lost out. But then Jones was like, I like that idea. So he took some of Dragon Tavern's ideas. I felt like he never had an idea.
I don't remember what his idea was.
I want to make a sci-fi. There's a fantasy game, a sci-fi game. I want to make a sci-fi game. But we're going to take some of your...
But I feel like they only made it sci-fantasy because the team didn't know anything.
Yeah.
They didn't know how to do fantasy. They only knew how to do sci-fi.
I have a question that came up. What do you like more, first person or third person shooters?
First person, 100%.
Yeah?
100%, yes. I love first person shooters. I find them to be easier than third person shooters and also more immersive. I don't want to see my character. I want to be my character. And first person shooters... I get to be the character.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I like about first person shooter, but I feel like ducking and stuff like that, I like more in
third person shooters. You see more of the screen around you. So you like if someone's sneaking up behind you, it's a little bit easier to see them.
Versus like hearing people and being like, "Where are you?"
But I am all in it for the immersive sim aspect.
The other thing that was super irritating to a lot of people is that they restarted this game over and over and over again, and they would just delete everything. So this guy goes away on vacation for a week and then comes back and all this stuff's gone.
Yeah.
But luckily he has it saved on his computer because he's smart. But I'm like, don't throw anything away. Games, you recycle stuff all the time. Why are you deleting it? It felt like very chaotic.
It was and Destiny's a hodgepodge of ideas. It is chaotic. They had to make a new engine. Their dev tools that were all new that they had to deal with. Activision was kind of annoyed because they didn't have a thing that was going on. They sent out the story.
So they originally were independent, and then they're like, this is taking too long and we need money. So they joined with Activision for one of the biggest publishing contracts, I think, to date. It's a 10-year contract, $500 million.
Dang.
There was definitely people that were voicing their frustration. You had Griesmer, who actually, he's the one that started Dragon Tavern, and he was like, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. You're going to have problems with this. You're going to have problems with that. So he was asked to resign. And he takes it as a badge of mark of honor is what he says. And then after him, a lot of other senior people quit or were fired. And then you have the other things that happened. Like, that was the guy that tweeted stuff?
Oh, Marty O'Donnell?
Yeah.
The tweeter?
The tweeter.
So Marty, every time I hear anything about Marty O'Donnell, he's such a drama queen. Yeah, the Halo soundtrack's great and all. Oh my god, I'm gonna get tweeted at. Anyway, he was mad that Activision didn't use his music in the trailer, so he tweeted about that.
So Activision, they put out a trailer. Activision took the art and then basically hired Paul McCartney to do the music. And so O'Donnell was like, this trailer does not come from us. It comes from Activision. And
is this fair? You can say that.
Which is true. Yeah. At the same time, though,
you work for Activision.
You work for that company, and you definitely should not tweet stuff like that out.
He also he got fired
airing of the grievances
by Bungie because they basically blame him for the poor voice acting of Peter Dinklage.
I love Peter Dinklage.
In Destiny. Well, it's half he was disgruntled and half the fact that the writing in that game is just atrocious because they didn't have writers.
No.
And they rewrote that game a bunch and they used Peter Dinklage, who was your little ghost guy in that game.
He was supposed to be like a side character, and then he ended up having to narrate thousands of lines, which is not what he signed up for.
He gave you most of the exposition and he talked to you throughout the whole thing, and most people didn't even have that many lines, so yeah, Marty, no wonder Marty was mad, and I'm sure Peter Dinklage was also not very happy about that.
But yeah, so he got fired, but then he sued them and got a lot of money, so good for you, dude.
He's still suing them.
Again?
Yeah, over music stuff about the TV show, the Halo TV show, I think, right now. He's just a suing dude. Suing everybody. They said the story of Destiny was worse than Twilight, which is a disservice to Twilight, frankly.
Twilight is one of the, like, if you look at which lines are used most often in Twilight, it's like, she looked at him, or it's like very simple.
At least I can understand the plot of Twilight. Okay. Destiny.
Well, it's Romeo and Juliet.
I was like, what is happening in this game? There's wizards on the moon. The Peter Dinklage line.
The big thing about Destiny is that they wanted a huge, expansive universe where you could rarely run into people, which, congratulations. And definitely it's an artist's dreams because they are making all of these environments.
I mean, it looks cool.
Yeah, I think that's Destiny, right? The tagline, Destiny. It looks cool.
It looks cool, though. It plays really well, too. It feels nice. Well, Halo feels nice to play as a first-person shooter. The Diablo III guys came down to their studio because when this launched, everyone was like, what is this game? Like, this is terrible. Yeah. And even
the trailer, like, when it first came out, no one really knew what it was about. And don't they have a television show, too?
No, they don't have a TV show.
Oh, that's not the TV show?
No.
What TV show is that, then?
I don't know. But, so everyone was upsetty about it, so the Diablo 3 guys came down and was like, look, I know your pain, just make an expansion pack and give them that and they'll forgive you. And you know what? People did! I think it's the Taken King or something like that, is the expansion pack.
That's because it's an actual storyline.
Yeah, they added an actual storyline, they fixed a bunch of shit in this expansion pack, and people were like, Destiny's great now. Destiny's great. And I think that's funny that that's the online game way to fix it. Just create an expansion pack and everyone's like, wow, that's tight. And the last line in this was like, maybe Bungie lost some good people and their soul along the way, is what Jason Schreier wrote. Mm-hmm. And I was like, dang, that's harsh.
They definitely said that there were way too many people employed. They had hundreds of employees, but still there's no like cohesion at all. And so that was really hard for them. And can we talk about the fact that they have bonuses based on their reviews
A lot
of
of people,
games?
the
Like,
Metacritic score, yeah, a lot of
why
games
are
have
you?
that.
Why is it based on critic scores versus how many games you sell? I feel like that's dumb.
Yes. Did you heard about the Fallout New Vegas one, right? Where
Yeah,
they were off by like a
like
percent, like
two.
1%,
Yeah.
and they didn't get their raise. Oh, that's so sad. I feel like they should have just gave it to them anyway.
Mm. But they did. That was
They
so
did.
like that was really close. That was too close.
Yeah, Bethesda. What the heck? I'm about to get blacklisted.
But yeah, so they were supposed to get bonuses based on 90 or above. That's like a high game. They ended up getting 77, so they lost out on $2.5 million in bonuses.
So next time you go complain on Metacritic, think about the poor developers' paychecks.
But really, you should be honest about what you think about games. And they should not be based on the rating of, like, Metacritic's rating. That's
Yeah,
like
do whatever you want.
if a production company for a movie got a bad score on, like, Rotten Tomato.
That seems like the future. I think they might do that. You guys will all get bonuses if our Rotten Tomato audience score. Wait, audience or critics? Is it like overall, or would you have to be specific?
I feel like they would do critics.
Yeah,
Because critic scores are always lower.
just to make it so you can't give the bonus, so you pick critic. Well, can't anyone go on Rotten Tomatoes and like do? So wouldn't the like studio?
No, you can do that. There's like a critic one, and then there is the viewer.
Yeah. So okay, just better. That's all I have to say about Destiny. Are you
Yeah.
done looking up the TV show?
I feel like I thought it was something else. Apparently, it's all over that they are thinking about doing a Destiny TV show for Netflix.
Interesting.
I
I guess it depends on how well
but-
this Halo one does, right?
feel like it's not doing so hot right now. No.
Well,
So what show am I thinking of that has the video game and the television show?
Quantum Break.
No. So we're on Witcher 3 now. So the thing about Witcher 3 is there was this guy who lives in Poland,
Mhm.
and he was like, hey, we're in Poland, and a lot of people... Oh, the game was Defiance. That was the game
What the
that I was
heck is
thinking of.
Defiance?
It was like a video game. It came out like the same time. So anyways, Witcher 3.
Witcher in general.
In general, because he put out the first two as well.
What was his name?
Ionsky? It's on the first chapter.
We have the book.
We apologize. We're awful at names. Yeah, it's Marcin Ironsky.
I have him on the second page.
Ironsky?
Owinski? I
Yeah.
have the audiobook. I should know this.
Yeah. So Marcin Ironsky, he grew up in Poland,
Mhm.
and because of the political state there, a lot of the things that they had were bootleg and
Pirated.
and he was all about going to these markets
Just
for like
wanted to play the
Western
same
stuff.
games as
Yeah.
everyone else.
He's like, Poland
His
deserves
Disney princess story. And then he went to the markets and got pirated software and was like, we should be able to distribute games.
Yeah.
So he made CD Project, or I think it's Project.
Yes.
Is that to localize games and to publish them in Poland, and he got a lot. He even got Baldur's Gate. And he was like, so I know people can pirate Baldur's Gate here in Poland, so we want to make it so they don't pirate it. So they made a collector's edition that had like maps and soundtracks and made it big, and people were into that.
But he also, which I mean, we can all understand. He's like, if you're poor, then yes, you're gonna.
There's two options. You
But
either don't
once
play
you're-
the game or you pirate it.
Once you're 20 and are making jobs, is what it said in there,
Yeah.
then you can purchase it, and then that way you pay into the industry that
I've
you
definitely did that.
appreciate.
When I was a kid, I didn't have any money. Yeah, but then when I got money, I subscribed to things. I bought the games myself. Like, yeah, pirating's bad, but for some people, that's all they have until they, get enough money. And sometimes they'll support you.
And so he was like, okay, well, we're starting to make these Western games. We want something that is Polish.
Mhm.
And so they're like, hey, there's a writer who's Polish, and he writes these books called The Witcher. And he
popular.
is Polish's
J.R.R. Tolkien.
Tolkien.
That's very nice of them to say about him.
I've not read the books. I know that you've looked more into the lore than I have because... no, thank you. But, So the writer of the Witcher games didn't care about video games, so he was like, yeah, sure, you can make my game
for cheap. Although later on he did like ask them for more money, and there was like this huge thing.
And then, of course, they're making they have the Netflix show now, so I'm sure he's doing great.
Yeah.
So originally it was made for the PC. Witcher 2 ended up being made for the PC and the Xbox.
They gave President Obama Witcher 2 when he visited Poland.
Yeah, the president of Poland was like, this is what Poland is known for. And President Obama's like, thanks, but he's not going to play it. It's not Obama. He probably wouldn't even let his daughters play it. I wouldn't let my daughters play it.
Yeah, Witcher 2, no. Although I do think Witcher 2 is better than 1, and I honestly think it's better than 3.
Oh.
Hot take. Yeah, so after 1 and 2, they wanted to make a even bigger game, so open world, and they wanted to make it on consoles. Because they mostly made for PC, which is a smaller market. Like, it's less... I wouldn't say PC is a smaller market, but like... You know what I mean?
Yeah, the PC gamers are definitely a hardcore crew, and they're very particular. Console peoples are particular too with the way they play games.
They want to like dip into both,
but there's multiple markets.
It's better to go both. So they were like, okay, we gotta make this bigger and on console. Which honestly, if you've used the Witcher 3 menus on console, rough. Am I right, guys? Like that's made for PC.
Yeah.
But they did managed to do it. We played it on console, so
yeah. And so the big thing was they wanted open world, but then they ended up making it so that the 3 different levels were easy, medium, hard. And then the thing that I wrote down is they didn't want a lot of FedEx quests.
Yeah, they didn't want to make boring quests.
I thought was hilarious because the FedEx quest they said is like you go fetch something and it's like not important. But I'm like I've definitely played a crap ton of quests. FedEx quests in Witcher 3.
50% of the quests they sketched out.
All of the freaking beast things that you have to go hunt are all FedEx quizzes. Quizzes. Oh my goodness, quests.
Yeah, it's definitely didn't cut out all of them. They definitely wanted to put some of those in there.
But Witcher 3, I think, had the most side quests out of any game that we've ever played.
They were really pushing for specifically 100 hours. That was what they were saying in their like press tours and stuff for it. They were like 100-hour game or more. So
yeah, I could see playing that game for way over that.
We
did not
months on that game.
Play half the side quests.
Yeah, we didn't, but it still took us a long time. Like most people actually didn't finish The Witcher 3, and that's why when they made Cyberpunk, they made the storyline quicker because they got complaints that people didn't finish The Witcher 3, which I can't blame them. There was a time when we were playing The Witcher and we were like, do we want to stop playing this game? Like halfway through. But I am interested in the fact they did a lot of detail work. Like they took food away from a town that was supposed to have famine. They were like, this art person just went crazy and put too much food in this town.
So they had to go in and they're like, some people will appreciate it. Most people won't even
like
notice.
Building by building being like, gotta take these apples away.
And then they had to do all the dialogue between these 2 fishermen because the engine wasn't divided up. And so they're like, yeah, these 2 fishermen giving the dialogue of Yennefer and Geralt, they're like, didn't translate well because
that's really funny.
There's some subtleties that like actual actors put in, and so a lot of the dialogue was changed and cut and all that stuff. But they do he makes a point to talk about the morality in the game and how the morality is they had few happy endings, and they said that this was a reflection on Polish culture, which I was like, really? Is
Poland really that depressed?
Well, they talk about the game was also inspired heavily by Polish fairy tales, not to mention the ugly history of racism, warfare, and genocide surrounding Warsaw, all of which had crept into The Witcher 3, and that's a direct quote from the book. So, that game definitely kind of is a downer.
It's a downer. It's edgy. The morality is pretty easy.
We also talk about crunch here. They had a full year of crunch. However, Poland by law pays for overtime. So that was something that was interesting.
But they pay less.
But they pay less because the cost of living in Poland is less. However, the studio made a point to point out that because they're having so many international people and expats join their studio, that their wages are increasing.
Their wages are increasing, and they switched their studio's language to English. which is interesting since they hired a lot more outside help after The Witcher 3 was made. They honestly, it was good that they delayed it. They were talking about this because they would have had to compete with Dragon Age Inquisition, and also they didn't want to crunch because they were talking about Assassin's Creed Unity and that face glitch.
Every Assassin's Creed game
That
has
one was
glitches.
pretty bad though.
But yeah, when you're missing your face, that's
when you're missing your face. The Witcher 3 still had glitches. Like when we played it, there was like T-posing hanged men and stuff in the background, which was really funny. Like even the Game of the Year Super Cool Guy Updated Edition had that kind of stuff. Which is why when Cyberpunk came out and everyone was like, ew, I was like, what do you expect? Did you play The Witcher 3? My gosh, you guys. But everyone experiences glitches in games differently. You can go through a whole game with no glitches, and then your friend could just have the worst time.
I feel like we run into a lot of glitches, but
maybe we just get over it faster than most people.
That's true.
Most people I know.
We just expect
like
it.
Rage quit, and I was like, what? You just clipped through the wall a little bit. Like, calm down.
You land in the rock, and then you try to jump out of it. Or you just restart your game.
Stuck. Or like, you have to kill all the enemies in a space, but one of them's like stuck in a rock, so you have to like reload the encounter. Ugh. That's the worst. I learned about different levels of bugs. Like, they said if you see a bug or a glitch, the developer knows it's there. It's just a C-tier bug that they were like, it doesn't break the game, so we're not going to worry about it.
Unless you're like We Happy Few, which freaking crashes all the time.
Yeah, crashing is the big one.
This leads us to our
final one.
Chapter, which was to me the saddest. So this is the last chapter of the book is Star Wars 1313, which I remember coming out in E3 and everyone was crazy excited about it. Everyone loves Star Wars. Some of the games are garbage. Some of the games are
There's
really
a lot of Star Wars games. You can't be like...
No, but that's why it's like you never know what you're going to get with a Star Wars game.
True. It's like a box of chocolates. Star Wars games.
Yeah, literally, like, it could be the best game ever or the biggest piece of garbage.
Sometimes they'll get the nice nougat one, and sometimes they'll get the one with the cherry in it, and I hate those. No. And I'll be like, ew, but then, like, Elise likes the cherry ones.
I do.
So she'll be like, this game's great. So you never know. Star Wars games are like boxes of chocolates.
I will always, I do like the cherry ones. There's something for everyone. I had to look up, so we'll talk about more 1313 and what it is and why it's not a thing, but, so I like the VR, the Star Wars
Vader
game.
Immortal?
Yeah, I think think that's a really, like,
it's good. I like Vader
a good game.
Immortal.
And it's something, I feel like it's something that, like, anyone can play. You don't need to know all that much about Star Wars lore. But as I was reading this chapter, I'm like, wait a minute. Is LucasArts is no longer.
It's back. It's back.
And I'm like, well, then who made that? And so I had to look it up. And it is back.
It's back.
But it's named something else.
Mm-hmm. I remember when the LucasArts thing was shut down because it was around the time the Epic Mickey stuff was shut down. Because Disney was like, video games are not profitable. We're canceling. But now I'm so excited. Disney is now bringing video games back. So fingers crossed for Epic Mickey because I want it to come back.
So like I knew we were going to talk about Epic Mickey because we liked Epic Mickey. Yes. The first game was made for the Wii on purpose. Yeah. Like it was made for the Wii design, and then the second game was made for the Wii design, but then they're like, you know what, we need to move it on multiple consoles. Yeah. But each console plays differently, and I don't think that was fair for them.
That wasn't
for
fair.
Epic Mickey. But it was a 2-player game, and how rare is that?
It was cool to be a 2-player game.
And Oswald,
I played as Oswald.
I know, but that part of like Disney history, is something that
the only
not a lot
reason
of people
Oswald
know.
Is back is because of Epic Mickey.
Take that.
Nobody would even know Oswald exists if it wasn't for Epic Mickey.
True story. So no one's surprised that the second one failed, but yet Disney's like, oh, too bad.
And those musical numbers, yikes. Those musical boss fights, like I get it, Disney, but like, yeesh.
But Disney also does your games again.
Kingdom Hearts.
I don't know why. My brain is not working.
That's
today.
more Square Enix.
Yes, but that is a hugely profitable game.
Yeah, now it is. I remember when nobody cared about Kingdom Hearts, and now like 3 came out, and everyone's like, "Oh, Kingdom Hearts." There's gonna be a 4th one coming out soon.
So Star Wars 1313. LucasArts, which is a part of, obviously, Lucasfilms. They're a subcategory. In the past, Star Wars games were given to other studios to make, which is why they're a variety of quality. Yeah. And so they had the best demo at E3. Like that, they were voted for the best demo at E3 for 13.
Next to Watch Dogs.
Yeah, which I like Watch Dogs.
The Watch Dogs demo was really cool.
Yeah. But yeah, the demos, and so you get a lot of demos that don't actually come out in the games, but so again, they're used to other companies making them, so they like dove in. 1313 was also supposed to be tied to a television show.
Yeah.
Which
it seems like it turned into The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Have to be real with you. So they were going to make this show called Underworld, and when they said that, I thought they meant the vampire thing. And I was like, did LucasArts make Underworld? No.
I like Star Wars, but I don't care about the lore. Like, I'm not, like, a deep diver. I'm not
They wanted to make a Star Wars show for adults called Underworld, but it's about, like, a bounty hunter and, like, the nitty-gritty of the underground.
But not necessarily all Force stuff. But like, honestly, just in the world of Star Wars.
If any of y'all played KOTOR, that has that. So, like, they already made that. It exists. It's called KOTOR.
Well, they also have Boba Fett. This is the show that came out, too.
That's true. I didn't watch Boba Fett.
I started it. I'm sorry. It was boring.
I've heard mixed reviews, too.
Yeah.
And then they didn't know what they wanted, which is, most of these studios, like, they started with a GTA game, and then they contacted Rockstar. Rockstar's like, that's going to cost you a lot of money, and they're like, oh, I can't have that.
But then George Lucas is still involved in all the stuff, Star Wars at this time, and he's the one where, like, you can't tell him no. And so he wanted to go in one direction, and they're like, but we did all this stuff.
Yeah, and they made a protagonist bounty hunter and all that, and then George Lucas came in and was like, actually, you have to make this Boba Fett instead. And they're like, we already made a backstory, and like we hired an actor and we filmed his face in the scenes, and we have to do it all over again. And George Lucas is used to film. He does not understand video games. Which,
But also, I felt like it was a really dumb idea to tie a video game to a television show that was still in development. Because in development, television shows and movies do so many changes before they become in production that you have to do like 10 times the amount of work in video games what you would do in a television show.
George Lucas was used to being able to change his mind and like iterate on stuff immediately and then have it fixed, but games take a lot more work.
Yeah. And then they were like, okay, so we're making this, and there's another game that we also have in development, and then they were told that things were going on pause for that game, and then there's a hiring freeze, and they're like, we're getting close to finishing this game. We need more people. Mm-hmm. And they're like, something weird is going on. And then Disney
bought LucasArts and Star Wars. And they were like, this makes sense now.
Mm-hmm. But there was still... So they're like, okay, so we're still making this game, but there's a freeze. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that they talked about, I think, is that every time LucasArts went through several... main presidents, and every time there was a huge turnover, and so they're like, well, we're being bought by this company, like, what does that mean? And then they're like, continue to make your game. And then when Epic Mickey Studios
got shut down, Bob Iger, terrible Disney president, wanted to outsource Star Wars to other companies again, and he was like, there's no money in video games, only mobile games. So they started focusing on mobile games, and they shut down all their video game studios. Now they're coming back. So I guess it didn't work out. Good thing, because Bob Iger is not the freaking CEO anymore. All my homies hate Bob Iger.
So then they were like, okay, EA could save us. Like, if they're going to push it to another studio,
they thought EA was going to buy LucasArts.
Yeah, so they went to a meeting.
Oh, no, because, They thought EA was going to buy LucasArts. EA didn't buy LucasArts. Disney shut them down. Then after they got shut down, they went to pitch Star Wars 1313 to Visceral Games, which is EA, and it was the people who made Dead Space. So they gave their like all on this pitch, and they're like, "Hey, can we finish this game?" And the people at Visceral were like, "I'm not sure what they told you, But you guys were supposed to come here for interviews for our game.
For like job interviews.
Yeah, we're not gonna finish your game, and it's so sad.
A bunch of them they just left.
We're so close. They were so close.
They were so close to finishing. I feel like eventually we may see this game. He did tease it in the chapter that Henning, who did the first 3 Uncharted games, she worked for EA, and she was gonna do a Star Wars game. It's still kind of like in development that she may still do a Star Wars game, although she doesn't work for EA anymore. But so it's I feel like it's a teaser, like it could still happen, especially since Boba Fett is now a show.
Yes, I honestly think 1313 will happen. It won't be called that. It'll be something else, but it'll be something similar. It will happen eventually. Especially there's such an uptick with Star Wars games right now.
Yeah.
They just came out with the Skywalker saga for Lego, and KOTOR 1, Knights of the Old Republic, is getting a remake for PS5. So I feel like Star Wars games, this one's gonna come back.
Hopefully, because it looked cool. I hope they get to do what they originally wanted to, though. I don't really want to play a Boba Fett game.
I don't want to be Boba Fett.
I mean,
it'll be fine.
Yeah. So
you're probably gonna play Boba Fett or the Mandalorian.
I feel like they could have put Boba Fett in the game as how what was the Star Wars game that we played?
Fallen Order,
where they bring in Darth Vader. Spoiler. At the end.
Oh.
Yeah, he's at the end.
That's right, I forgot.
And it was like a cool thing, and I thought you could do the same thing for Boba Fett, because a lot of people like Boba Fett. So if you had to work with him on a mission.
Fallen Order 2 is supposed to be announced this summer.
Yeah. So I feel like that could have been a thing, but I don't think you should have Boba Fett as a main character.
What if they just make Star Wars 1313, but you're Cal Kestis from Fallen Order? That's the next game.
He becomes the bounty hunter.
What if they mimic the trailer? Oh, I'm so excited for this. It's not E3 because this is canceled, so it's Summer Games Fest, but still, hype.
Yeah, so we end this chapter on a sad note, because they're this game is so awesome. We love this game. They put so much work into it. They're like, this game is gonna be awesome, and then canceled. But
is it? Dun dun dun. And then they have an epilogue where he's basically games attract a certain type of workaholic, and video games are forged in fire.
Yeah, I'm surprised. Honestly, I'm surprised any games get made.
Me too. I'm glad for all you devs who have that kind of passion that you're willing to work through all this BS.
Yeah.
To make the games that you believe in, and I appreciate it.
We appreciate it. We love playing games.
The games you make are amazing, regardless. You're amazing. I could not do what you do. Incredible.
So I was a little surprised that there was some big games mentioned in here, obviously, but there are also some games that are notorious problems. Looking at you, Assassin's Creed, that were not mentioned at all. I mean, Assassin's Creed Unity was mentioned as a meme, but
well, I think it's just
Ubisoft.
Did they have a connection to Baldur's Gate, or did they go to PAX?
That is the connection here. But there are some large studios or games that, again, have notorious issues that.
Yeah, but he had a lot.
That's true.
So and
I think he tried to
touch balance,
an overall thing in the industry. These are the things.
AAA, AA, and indie games.
True.
So I think he did a good job at picking what he could.
If there was a
maybe they declined for comment.
but that was in some of the chapters too. If there was a chapter of a game that you could pitch, what game would you want to know more about?
Out of the 10?
So yeah, if they were there's going to be an 11th chapter.
Oh.
And you could pitch what game you want to hear the backstory of.
That's a good question.
What game would you like to know more about? I feel like he didn't talk a lot about the older games. These are all more relatively new games. I felt like I would have liked to know a little bit more of a history to know, if this is a constant problem or.
I'd actually really like to learn about the studio that makes Saints Row, because they were with THQ Nordic for a long time, and they're rebooting it right now. And they went through a lot of changes between 1 and 2 are completely different games than 3 and 4 and Get Out of Hell. So I would like to know what their thought process was, and when they had to switch studios, how that worked. And then what happened between Get Out of Hell and the reboot that's coming out in August. So I played all these games last year, and they were fascinating to me.
Mm.
What about you?
Now I'm like thinking about back on all the games that we play. I think I would like to know. Obviously, I think I would like a Ubisoft.
Yeah, just all of Ubisoft. That's
Well,
kind of
they have so many
they have a
different
division.
studios.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what I would like to see more of, is like more international. I mean, we just with The Witcher we see Poland, but maybe something out of Japan, or
Yeah,
like
there
the
wasn't-
different work cultures in different countries.
I'm sure they didn't do like the JRPG studios or like Sega because they'd have to go translator.
But also maybe as well, like
Fantasy.
I would like to hear about how games are different in different countries, because obviously you have different voiceovers. Sometimes things are translate differently in games, so like there's small changes.
Oh,
But
and also the studio that makes Stalker, Game
oh,
World, the Ukrainian studio, because they're making Stalker 2 right now, and obviously it's delayed for obvious reasons.
world reasons, yeah.
But they're fascinating to me because they actually, I think they localized the first game themselves. So everyone who speaks English in that game has a heavy accent and stuff, and I'm like, I'd be fascinated to hear their story, for sure. I think they're called like Game World.
Yeah, I think again there's a lot of studios, and that's one of the cool things about video games is they are kind of like worldwide universal, and like you can make a video game in Japan or China or I don't know, where other, I know Norway has some studios, Sweden, you have Guerrilla Games.
Isn't Ubisoft France?
Ubisoft is in they're in Canada. Obviously, they're in
There's a couple
California.
Australian
Yeah.
ones too. Fruit Ninja was made by Australian
There you
team.
go.
There you go.
Maybe also like a mobile game that wasn't in here.
Well, what about
They
Pear
talked
Surfer?
about it. I mean, they barely talked about it, but yeah. So that would have been
We can read his next book, Press Reset, about, I think those are about studios that shut down. So bummer.
which is
We're gonna take a break from that, from being sad.
Yes.
And our next book is actually related to Star Wars because May and fourths and with yous. Our next book is Star Wars: The Old Republic Revan by Drew Karpyshyn, who wrote the first Mass Effect book. That is the first book we talked about on this series. Because I just finished KOTOR 1 and 2, and I have opinions.
So yes, join us next month.
When
we dive into Legends.
I'm making
Star
her
Wars.
read a Star Wars book.
Old Republic. So I'm gonna learn all Star Wars.
You're gonna know so much lore.